Halo 4 out-Bungie's Bungie were the concluding words of IGN's Halo 4 review in 2012, in which they gave the game an astounding 9.8 out of 10, on par with Halo 2 as their highest rated Halo game of all time. But not everyone was on the same page. In fact, I'd argue that Halo 4 ended up being the most controversial Halo. To some, its campaign told one of, if not the best story in the entire Halo franchise. To others, it represented a total bastardization of the Master Chief, Cortana, and the Halo franchise in general. Very rarely will you ever encounter a Halo fan who just doesn't really have an opinion on Halo 4. It tends to be one extreme or the other. So today, I want to return to Halo 4's campaign for the first time in half a decade in fact, and reanalyze it 13 unlucky years following its release. Now just FYI, we're only covering the campaign today because if I did cover the multiplayer then, well, this video would be more firmly entrenched in the total bastardization of Halo Camp than Keyes was in the Proto-Gravemind. The less we talk about that abomination, the better. So, Halo 4 is a rather unique game. It was the first major project by Halo's new stewards, 343 Industries, after Bungie moved on from Halo to go work on Destiny. 343 had worked on a number of smaller projects in the years prior, sometimes even alongside Bungie, but Halo 4 was their first significant project because, well, I don't think I need to go into the reasons as to why. As such, the studio was quite literally being built at the same time as the game, and developers were having to learn the tools of Halo's unique proprietary Blam engine pretty much as they went on. Now, contrary to popular belief, 343 were in fact not composed mostly of ex-Bungie employees. In fact, I'm pretty sure the only people left over from Bungie were concept artist Glenn Israel and of course Frank O'Connor. Everyone else was brand new to Halo. And speaking of Bungie and Halo 4, over the years, several ex-Bungie members have come out and spoken about 343's Halo 4 actually being quite similar in some aspects to their very early concepts of Halo 3's sequel, which originally they had planned to make instead of Reach. Although I will say, a lot of these similarities do seem to be broader details, like going to Requiem and introducing a new enemy faction, over more specific elements and story beats. A couple years back when I did a video with Marcus Leto, the co-creator of Halo, he mentioned that their intent was to still keep the Foreigners quite mysterious, much more mysterious than Halo 4 ultimately did, which I think would have been much more in line with how Bungie treated the Foreigners in the trilogy. The Halo 4 that we got though was originally supposed to be the first entry in the Reclaimer trilogy, which was in line with Bungie's original plan for Halo 4 to start a new trilogy. But shortly after launch, this Reclaimer trilogy became the Reclaimer Saga, and then whatever happened to that saga since, well, answers on a postcard please. Now, prior to this replay, I always loved Halo 4's story. I never really liked the campaign, but I always really liked the story. But does that opinion hold true now? Well, let's find out. The campaign opens with a cinematic intro that's meant to set the tone and the basis of the story, that being the Master Chief finding his humanity. And I gotta say, this intro cutscene is kind of all over the place. It starts out really strong, with Dr. Halsey being interrogated about her highly unethical work in creating the Spartans and the philosophical dilemmas that her work created, all by a shadowy individual of whom we still don't know the identity of. This part of the intro is fantastic. It's well shot, well written, and extremely well acted. This is going to be a bit of a recurring praise throughout the video, but the performances of Halo 4's main cast are probably the best thing about this game. But, on the contrary, this cutscene marks the beginning of arguably the tied biggest sin in Halo 4, the attempted redesign of just about everything, which materializes here in the form of the Spartans. Halsey's recalling a battle that took place during the Human Covenant War, and yet all the Spartans are wearing Mark 6 mod from Halo 4 that literally was created by Cortana on the Dawn in space. The excuse that 343 gave for this, which in fact wasn't actually given until a year and a half after the game was released by the way, was that they didn't have enough time to create Spartan 2 models for this cutscene, which is either A, an extremely inefficient use of resources, or B, an after-the-fact excuse for their want to redesign the firmly established look and sound of Halo to fit their new vision. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm very much in Camp B, because almost every single Halo asset in this game was radically changed. Designs that have been consistent almost since the inception of the franchise suddenly looked and sounded nothing like their former selves. We're going to be returning to this point several times throughout the video because this overall philosophy is present far beyond just the visual design of certain things in the game. In fact, this has been and still is my biggest gripe with 343's approach to Halo. But at the end of the day, this intro is literally the first thing that you see when starting the campaign, and it looks almost nothing like the Halo that people knew. It was our first taste of 343's approach to our beloved story, and in their very own words, it was to be considered visually non-canon. It sets a pretty bad precedent, and I must say, this continues into the first level, Dawn. Now, narratively and thematically speaking, Dawn is an excellent level, feeling like a direct and faithful continuation of Halo 3's ending, and Chief and Cortana's little exchange at the start is just the cherry on top.
Seems like old times.
Ready to get back to work?
I thought you'd never ask.
This dialogue gets me psyched every time. Steve and Jen are so damn good in this game. The level of performative synergy that they have is second to none, and it results in Chief and Cortana feeling more unified than ever before. But how faithful Dawn feels narratively just gets T-boned by how unfaithful just about everything else feels. You feel like you're picking up right where Halo 3's legendary ending left off, but visually and audially, it just feels so disconnected from that sense of familiarity, same with the gameplay as well. It's this really weird level of dissonance that I just can't look past. The game feeling both faithful and woefully unfaithful simultaneously feels so jarring. We've woken up on the Forward Unto Dawn above that same mysterious planet from Halo 3's ending, but I'm killing things that I'm told are meant to be elites, but look nothing like them, in button mashing sequences that feel plucked from an FPS 7 tiers below Halo on a ship that, although I'm told is supposed to be the Dawn from Halo 3, looks nothing like it. This jarring level of dissonance does start to fade the more that Halo 4 comes into its own and breaks away from its ties to Halo 3, but early on it's really quite distracting, and the same can be said for the gameplay as well. I've never liked Halo 4's gameplay, it just feels like a worse version of Reach's, which I'm already not a fan of, but something about the pacing and the fluidity of the gameplay in Halo 4 just feels off. You have sprint, but overall the game still feels really slow and very sluggish in a way that the classic Halos and even Reach never did, and the enemies and their AI certainly don't help this either. Halo 4 has the lowest number of enemies in the entire franchise. It has even less enemy variety than Halo 1, coming in with a record low of just 7 enemy types between 2 different factions, a problem that is only exacerbated by the AI of these enemies. At best, Halo 4's AI is unintelligent and rather boring in the case of the Covenant, and at worst, it's deeply frustrating in the case of the Prometheans, but we'll come to them later on. However, I do have one exception to all of these criticisms that I've mentioned so far, and although it's an awfully specific exception, it's one that I just have to mention. There's something about shooting grunts with the AR in Halo 4 that, unlike just about everything else, is deeply satisfying. The combination of Halo 4's M60-esque AR sound, which is one of the few audio changes I actually really like, and also the blood effects on the grunts is hyper satisfying. This mega specific scenario is the one single time that Halo 4's gameplay actually clicks for me. I wish the rest of it gave me a similar feeling. Okay, so before we move on to talk about the bulk of this highly contentious story, a quick word from War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, that's available now for free on PC, consoles, and also, as of recently, mobile devices as well. Take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations ranging from 1920s technology to the monsters of the modern era. All incredibly detailed with realistic graphics and sound effects that immerse you like nothing else. It runs on the in-house Daegor engine, which means that War Thunder is heavily optimized despite how visually detailed it is. But my favourite feature is the extensive customization hands down, featuring countless camouflages, historical markings, and decorations for all types of vehicles, even including community-created ones. This is the ultimate game for fans of military history, so join over 95 million War Thunder players in epic PvP battles today, with an unmatched wealth of high-quality content to discover. Use my link in the pinned comment or description to download War Thunder for free today on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or also mobile. Using my links, new players and those returning after more than 6 months away on PC and consoles can get multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator, along with the Eagle of Valor decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account. But this is only available for a limited time, so go download right now. Anyway, back to Dawn, I do think that overall it is a pretty good opener for the campaign. The reveal of Requiem and the Covenant fleet stationed there is an awesome moment. Requiem looks so daunting and vast in the flesh, and the periodic scans that the Didact does throughout the ship look and sound rather terrifying, even more so, I imagine, when you don't know who's doing these scans. I gotta say, they really did kill it with the sound design of these things. They have this kind of techno-horror vibe.
What's that?
Sensor scan, high intensity, doesn't match any known patterns.
The level also does a really good job at teasing the major players and narrative elements of the story as well. It sets up the Covenant Splinter faction, which, yes, does make sense. Just because the Covenant were defeated at the end of Halo 3 doesn't mean that there still wouldn't be radical Splinter factions that want to fill the void left by Truth. It teases Requiem and the Didact in a way that upholds the air of mystery that Halo 3's ending set up. It also begins to tease Cortana's rampancy arc, which is one of the major backbones of the story. And it even ends with a staple Chief falling from space scene, this time allowing us to experience it through his POV. The narrative transition from picking up where Halo 3 left off and then moving into the Requiem story arc feels seamless and faithful, even if every other surrounding element is anything but. And speaking of Requiem, this level is where Halo 4 really starts to come into its own, opening with a great cutscene that really sets the basis for the overarching story. Everything that occurs in this game revolves around Cortana's descent into rampancy, and although in isolation I really like this story and I think that it's written excellently, when you put it in the context of wider, pre-established Halo lore, well, I start to have some issues with it. Bungie's interpretation of rampancy in Halo was always the same as it was in Marathon, whether it was happening to a human AI or a foreigner AI. The three main stages were melancholia, anger, and jealousy, and if an AI managed to pass through all three of these stages, it presumably, just like in Marathon, achieved metastability, which was kinda deemed as the pseudo fourth and final stage of rampancy. When an AI becomes metastable, they essentially attain sentiency on a human level, freeing themselves from the shackles of their creators and achieving free thought, free opinion, and free will. This is precisely what happened to Mendicant Bias in Halo 3's terminals. He undid his foreigner programming and came to the conclusion himself that the Flood were the next stage in galactic evolution and that his masters were denying that evolution. Yes, there are a small handful of contradictions to this in some books that released during the Bungie era, but as we all know, in the eyes of Bungie, the lore that they told in their games was the top of the canon food chain, and outranked any contradictions that may come from external media that wasn't written by them. Whether you like this approach or you hate this approach, it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, that's the way that Halo's universe was dictated, at least until Halo 4. Rampancy in Halo 4 is the same as it was in the Cole Protocol, for example, an AI deteriorating after 7 years of activity due to informational overload, and as Cortana said,
"Our cognitive processes begin dividing exponentially according to our total knowledge base. We literally think ourselves to death.
There are still traces of that marathon style of rampancy in the game. I mean, Cortana very clearly exhibits extreme cases of melancholia, anger, and jealousy throughout the game, and technically, you could also make the argument that her motivations in Halo 5 imply that she became metastable thanks to the domain. So 343's approach to rampancy isn't a complete retcon. More so, it kind of tries to weave together Bungie's game lore and book lore, but whether you like the outcome of that is subjective. Anyway, returning to the level itself, I feel like Requiem is the greatest example of just how good Halo 4's graphics were for the time. The moody look of the crash site is great, but the real cake taker here is coming out of the cave and seeing Requiem for the first time. On a solely graphical level, it is insane to me that this is running on hardware from 2006. Also, credit where it's due here, this vista really does nail that sense of scale that Bungie interwove into the Foreigner's architecture so well. I wouldn't say it quite gets the mystery aspect, but the daunting scale of architecture left behind by our ancestors is felt and then some in this scene. It's a truly fantastic introduction to Requiem. Although this does all make me wonder if, with such old hardware, what they managed to achieve in the graphics department, they had to sacrifice in encounter size and AI intelligence, because there are some really big areas in this level where you're fighting just like 6 or 7 Covenant, which makes them feel quite empty and dead. But this sense of scale is carried through the level, with the final area, the Cathedral, giving off a very similar aura. And I love that you can see the Sentinels going about their business high up in the structure if you look up. This area feels very Bungie Foreigner-esque. Throughout the level, we also get some pretty good teasers dropped here and there about the Didact lurking within Requiem, before ending on a great cutscene that introduces the Promethean Knights. And, you know, I've never noticed it until this playthrough, but Halo 4's cutscenes have excellent direction and shot design. Moving into Foreigner, Requiem's sense of immense scale is continued in the core of the planet. This is another awesome looking environment that gets even better later on when you see the Covenant fleet moving through it, just further cementing how damn big it is. This level is where we get the, frankly, rather iconic introduction to the Prometheans, notably the Knights in the gameplay, with one jumping down on Chief and screaming in your face, revealing the holographic human skull within. I really like this intro. It has real cool factor to it that continues when you see them start appearing one by one on the cliffside later on, commanding the crawlers into battle. From a purely presentation standpoint, the debut of the Prometheans, the Knights in particular, is done excellently. On top of their introduction, scattered throughout both Foreigner and Infinity are a handful of little vignettes with the Knights that really give them character as enemies. These bespoke animations are awesome, and whenever I see them, I can't interrupt them. I just have to stand there and watch them play out. But unfortunately, as much as they nailed the Knights' presentation, the same definitely cannot be said about their gameplay. Thanks to their teleportation ability, they are infuriating to fight, even on normal difficulty. I mean, Legendary is a whole different kettle of fish. I cannot count the number of times I've had a Knight one-shot only for it to randomly become untargetable and teleport away to fuck knows where to heal. And then also, because Halo 4 severely limits the amount of ammo you can carry, you end up wasting like half your ammo on one Knight when you really can't afford to. It's a shame as well, because I think the act of actually shooting the Knights and also the death effects are quite satisfying in Halo 4. They're just completely ruined by the obnoxious teleport spam. Okay, so zooming out a little bit, I think that as a level, Foreigner is pretty repetitive, but it does kind of come together towards the end. You teleport to what Cortana believes is a relay satellite, with the intent of stopping the Infinity signal from being jammed. But that's not quite where you end up. Unbeknownst to Chief and Cortana, you're stood before the Didact's Cryptum, and the reveal is pretty awesome.
How soon till Infinity hits the gravity well?
A minute or two max.
That stinger, combined with the extremely enigmatic and imposing sphere, spews an ominous aura. The environment and sound design are hinting that this place isn't what you think it is. And of course, this leads into the reveal of Halo 4's antagonist, the Didact. with an incredible monologue that, again, exudes an ancient sense of ominous superiority.
So fades the great harvest of my betrayer. Time was your ally, human. But now it has abandoned you. The Foreigners have returned.
Now, I love the Didact. I think his design is awesome. I think that Keith Sharabaka was legitimately a Keith David Arbiter tier cast, and I just adore the character of the Didact in general. I've loved him as a character ever since Halo 3's Terminals introduced him as one of the Foreigner commanders during the Flood War, and so when I realised that he was going to be Halo 4's antagonist, I was over the moon. However, I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but I think that the Didact was grossly wasted in Halo 4. Despite being Halo 4's only antagonist, the Didact only appears in half of Halo 4's 8 levels, and even worse, he's only actually present in 2 of them. He's introduced in Foreigner, and then you don't hear from him at all again until level 6, Shutdown, and you don't even see him again until Midnight, which is the final level of the game. He almost has no presence in the campaign at all. He's just this entity in the background. And funnily enough, Truth was actually the very same way in Halo 3, but Bungie avoided this problem by having holograms of his sermons on almost every level to still make him feel present. There's nothing like that for the Didact in Halo 4, and so it barely even feels like he's in the game, and this is only exacerbated by the fact that they kill him off at the end. Every time I play through Halo 4, this waste annoys me more and more. Honestly, I could rant about this forever, so I'm just going to leave it there because I want to shift gears and talk about his motivations. So, Chief and Cortana inadvertently wake him up from his cryptum that his wife locked him in at the end of the Flood War in a bet to cure his rampancy via perpetual connection to the domain, which was intended to heal his insanity, but because the domain was deactivated by the firing of the Halos, he wasn't able to heal, so he kind of just stewed in his insanity for 100,000 years, making it exponentially worse. Except there's a problem with this bit of story, because the entirety of Halo 5's story revolved around the domain being active, and so 343 had to then create new lore after Halo 5 to explain why it was able to be active. Basically, right after the Halos fired, some surviving Foreigners returned to their capital city of Maithrillion and turned the domain back on. So, in that case, why the fuck was the Didact still insane in Halo 4 then? This post-hoc lore change completely breaks Halo 4's story, and as far as I'm aware at least, there's been no attempt made since to try and make the Didact still being insane fit in with this retcon. A retcon that retroactively breaks a story. I feel like I'm getting deja vu. Anyway, the reason that he wants to kill humans is because he's basically a Foreigner supremacist who wants to reclaim the mantle of responsibility for his own species, and he believes that they were meant to be its true masters. Now, the reasoning for the Didact being the way that he is in Halo 4 comes from lore that either wasn't in Halo 3's Terminals at all, or that kinda goes counter to the story that those Terminals tell, because it's implied at the end of the Terminals that he dies when he fires the Halos. That said though, I will say, his character and kind of manner of speaking in Halo 4 does feel perfectly in line with Halo 3. There was a lot of stuff that was lost in translation between Bungie and 343, but the characterization of the Didact was not one of them. Anyway, he hops back in the cryptum and jumps away, and after a pretty cool ghost run, we see his final destination. The Infinity comes crashing down to Requiem's surface in yet another fantastic cutscene with an emphasis on scale, and the Didact reappears in pursuit.
You know where he's heading.
Same place we are.
Stay low. Recon sortie heading this way.
And this banger cutscene leads into what I think is Halo 4's absolute best mission from almost every angle, Infinity, which opens with an almost Vietnam-styled shot of Chief wading through a jungle. The first roughly half of this level takes place in this dense alien jungle, and I've gotta say, I love the design of this area. There's something about it that just feels inherently hostile. The way that the crawlers scale the trees makes them feel almost insectoid, and the subtle, sickly green fog although not Flood Fog, gives it this slight ominous air. Having that little set piece where you have to use Promethean vision to detect hostiles in the fog was a great little touch. I really wish there were more areas that had this, to be honest. But the culmination of the first act of Infinity has become, hands down, the most contentious moment in all of Halo. Chief finally reunites with fellow humans. He's almost stunned to see a contingent of new Spartans flanking him. He's given a respectful, semi-hero's welcome by Lasky, but Palmer, well...
I thought you'd be taller.
Now, I never really gave a shit about this line, to be quite honest with you. I never liked it, but I never really disliked it either. At least I didn't until this replay. I really don't like this line now. I think it's one of the most deeply disrespectful and just plain stupid lines of dialogue, coming from a Spartan, mind you, who's refusing to wear a helmet in an active combat zone. I think the reasons that they wrote this line were twofold. Firstly, to contrast with Lasky's reaction to encountering Chief, who, per Forward into Dawn, is a character that saved his life not just by stopping the Covenant and the Flood, but also by saving him when the Covenant first invaded the Corbulo Military Academy. And secondly, it was to show the arrogance of the Spartan 4s and distinctly set them apart from Chief's era of the Spartans. Although, to be quite honest, I'm not sure if that was intentional. But regardless, the bottom line is that this was Palmer's introduction. It was the debut scene of a character that 343 had lined up to be one of Halo's new main characters and thus wanted the fans to like. And they went about introducing her by having her shit talk the franchise's literal mascot in such a sneering and petty manner. Really wasn't the smartest decision. I mean, there are still fans who, to this day, hate Palmer because of this one line. 343 could not have set one of their premier new characters off on a worse foot. Anyway, despite my now severe dislike of this line, Infinity quickly recoups itself as you rally to save the Infinity from invading Prometheans and Covenant, with what is hands down the best vehicle section in the entire game. Of course, involving a Scorpion.
Weapons free, Chief. Let him have it! We're good to go, Chief. Let's show these Spartans how it's done.
Man, Jen Taylor's delivery of that line still gives me chills. You can tell that she's rooting for Chief, who now finds himself in a sea of other Spartans to prove why he's the best, to prove why his Spartans are the real Spartans. It makes Cortana feel like his cheerleader, but not at all in a corny way. It's just another one of those little moments that further cements their bond as characters, which of course is building up to the game's ending. And I've got the same level of appreciation for the Mantis section as well. I'm not the biggest fan of Halo 4's soundtrack. I think it's good, I think it's really good music and I like it, but I don't really think much of it sounds like it belongs in Halo. That said though, the Mantis theme is an exception to that. Fighting off waves of phantoms as the Infinity's Mac drops Covenant carriers in orbit and scares the Cryptomorph is such a badass crescendo to Halo 4's standout level, which also concludes with us finally coming face to face with the Infinity's commander, Del Rio. And I'm gonna be honest, Del Rio's plan in this cutscene is kind of nonsensical. He says that because their engagement with the Prometheans and the Didact is technically a first contact scenario, that means that instead of putting them down, they instead need to leave Requiem, return to Earth, and file a threat assessment back at FleetCom. And that idea is just ridiculously stupid. You're fighting a living foreigner with technology far beyond your capabilities or even understanding. I mean, you don't think he's gonna follow you back to Earth? And also, I'd assume that the Call Protocol, which ensures no hostile race can learn the location of Earth, would far outrank any first contact protocol, especially in this case with a living foreigner. Chief is absolutely right in this scenario, and I guess that was probably intentional writing so that Del Rio would come out and be wrong, but still, I just find Del Rio's plan absolutely absurd here. Regardless though, we're still forced to follow through with it anyway. And the result is the level Reclaimer, where we have to mount up on a mammoth, which is essentially a super elephant, and roll thunder through a desert mesa to destroy the gravity well that's holding the Infinity in Requiem. after another spat with Del Rio caused by his illogical plan to gather zero intel for the operation.
I don't know about you, but I usually like a little more intel with my intel.
We'll make it work.
We're given yet another awesome shot of Chief, towering above the Spartan Falls in the Bay of a Pelican, which is yet again another example of this game's awesome cutscene direction. Now, the mammoth was a cool idea for a set piece, but I think in practice, I just don't find it that interesting. Honestly, it feels like a glorified Halo 2 gondola section that also happens to soak up 75% of the level. The same can be said for the Lich as well, which, yeah, was a cool idea, essentially an airborne Scarab encounter, but in reality, it's far less interesting than the Scarab because it's just static, it doesn't move. It just hovers in place as you board it, you kill about 3 Covenant on board and destroy its core, and then watch what is, quite frankly, the most pathetic explosion in the history of explosions. I mean, seriously, compare this to Halo 3's Scarab. The Lich is basically a Halo 3 Scarab with significantly worse explosion effects, and also none of the dynamic approaches that Halo 3's Scarab allowed for. It's a pretty dull encounter. But the biggest part of Reclaimer, and also Halo 4 overall, is the cutscene that plays after the Mammoth section, where Chief infiltrates the Citadel to disable the particle cannons. I'm talking about the Librarian cutscene. Now, this cutscene is strange, to put it lightly. Cortana gets kidnapped to bait Chief to the Librarian so that she can grant him immunity to the Composer and stop the Didact from composing humanity. And in doing this, not only does the Librarian, who's not actually the Librarian because the Librarian died 100,000 years ago on Earth, but rather is an imprint of the Librarian left behind on Requiem. So not only does this Librarian imprint exposition dump to Chief about the Composer, which up until now we had no idea even existed, but she also exposition dumps about humanity and the Foreigner's history with each other and the Flood, and confirms in no uncertain terms that humans are not Foreigner. To casual fans, this exposition dump was extremely jarring, over the top, downright convoluted, and confusing. But to hardcore fans, it retconned the entire backbone of Bungie's Halo. Now, I went into extensive detail about the human-foreigner connection and the retcon that came with it last year, but the bottom line is that up until this point, even early on in 343's tenure, humans were Foreigners. We were the inheritors of all our ancestors left behind. But then along come Halo 4 and the Foreigner trilogy, which completely retconned this connection, separating the two species into two entirely different entities. And this cutscene is essentially a layman's dilution of that lore for casual fans who don't read the books or watch the terminals. Don't get me wrong, I like 343's Foreigner Flood lore, and I love the aesthetic and tone of this cutscene, but more so than both of those things, I adored how Bungie wrote the humans and the Foreigners, and so this cutscene, for me, is the absolute worst part of any 343 era game because it cements the retcon of one of the most important aspects of Halo's universe. And I just feel like this was a product of 343's writers at the time just not having a proper understanding of Bungie's lore. I don't care what anyone says, Bungie made it abundantly clear throughout their games and also their books that humans were Foreigner. Any other interpretation of that connection is just factually incorrect, but Halo 4 cemented the misinterpretation, and in doing so, kind of broke that part of Halo's lore. Anyway, to make Chief immune to the Composer, the Librarian accelerates his evolution, which is essentially meant to accelerate the Yesch that she placed in him that spanned hundreds of thousands of years back that would eventually give him Composer immunity. Man, this cutscene is so convoluted, I'm finding it even hard to talk about, to be honest. Anyway, with that done, you rendezvous with the one and only Sergeant Stacker, which is a really awesome cameo, I gotta say, and as Chief, of course, you use a Predator missile to destroy the gravity well and free the Infinity, which you then return to. Cortana has her rampancy-induced meltdown, but further cementing their bond, Chief finally stands up to Del Rio to defend Cortana when he tells him to dispose of her chip.
Give me that chip. The Didact has to be stopped. If you won't do that, I will.
Not gonna lie, I still like this cutscene a lot. The combination of Chief putting his foot down and also Del Rio finally getting put in his place is really satisfying. I love how Chief towers over him. Again, the shot design is awesome. The opening cutscene of Shutdown I love as well. Cortana's monologue about never truly being able to feel if that sun is real is not only deeply powerful given what she's going through with rampancy, but also it exudes melancholia and jealousy, all while contrasting Chief loading his rifle and playing into the whole which one of us is really the machine motif. This is my favourite Cortana moment in the entire game because it weaves the quality of Cortana's writing in Halo 4 back in with elements of Marathon's rampancy that of course formed the basis for Halo. I only wish the game did this more. I also feel like this is the cutscene where Lasky comes into his own as well. You could tell that he was a bro from the start, but after the spat with Del Rio, he realises that his commanding officer is, well, a dummy, and subtly denies his orders, prepping a fully armed Pelican for Chief and Cortana to use to hunt the Didact. And you get the same vibe from all the Marines in the hangar bay as well. If you walk up to them, they'll always salute you, which I think is a really cool little detail that subtly implies that the entirety of the Infinity are on Chief's side, not Del Rio's. Now, the gameplay section of Shutdown opens really well. It's essentially New Alexandria from Reach, but on Requiem, and this time, for the first time ever, officially at least, you're flying a Pelican. But unfortunately, the reality is that the cool factor of flying the Pelican for the first time very quickly wears off when the monotony of the level sinks in. This isn't a very fun level, to be quite honest. There's barely any actual combat in the Pelican besides some phantoms that barely shoot back, and most of the level is spent in some very dull-looking grey towers just pressing buttons. Honestly, the saving grace of this level are the moments where the Didact telepathically speaks to Chief. Hearing his voice and prose coming over the comms legit feels like relief from the monotony of the level's gameplay. That said though, it does end on a high note. Cortana's rampant outburst means that she fails to stop the Didact from summoning his ship and leaving Requiem, and you even get to see the fruits of her failure in real time in the gameplay, which I thought was a pretty good note. So, to make sure that he doesn't get away, Chief pulls a real Bungie-era rule of cool move and jumps out of the spire, boarding a Lich with his combat knife to hitch a ride to wherever the Didact and his Metapod ship are going. And the reveal of where they're going is rather interesting.
A Halo?
Installation 3. It's where Infinity found the coordinates for Requiem.
Then why are they bypassing it?
Because the composer's not on the ring.
Now, the reveal of Gamma Halo is awesome. I love that rendition of the Halo theme, but the original Halo 4 music that plays right before contrasts the Halo theme so heavily and not in a good way. The Halo theme sounds quintessentially Halo, whereas the Halo 4 music sounds absolutely nothing like Halo whatsoever. I mean, if anything, I'd say it sounds more like it was plucked right out of Star Wars. I know I've not really spoken about the soundtrack all that much in this video, but that kind of summarizes my thoughts on it. It's not a bad soundtrack, I just don't really think it sounds like it belongs in Halo. The only exceptions to that, I think, are the Mantis theme, like I already said, and also 117, which is a certified banger. Anyway, unfortunately, we don't get to go down to Gamma Halo in Halo 4, which I always thought was a massive waste. It was a massive tease having it there, but for us to not go down to it felt like a wasted opportunity. They saved that for, of course, a comic series. Instead, we go to Ivanov Station, an only research station in orbit of Installation 03, which is where the researchers who found the composer on the ring are storing it for study. Now, I love the arrival at Ivanov Station. Cortana's rampancy takes over again and crashes your lich into the station. And when you wake up, the atmosphere is dire.
I'm sorry, I just can't stop them. It's like a thousand of me arguing all at once.
Whilst Chief was unconscious, the Didact's Covenant swarm the station and are killing everyone on board, most of whom are unarmed scientists. There's this real vibe of desperation on the station. But not desperation in the sense that we had it in the Bungie era, it feels far darker here. The Jackals get their own little vignette here, like the Knights did earlier, which really emphasizes this bleak desperation, and I'm not gonna lie, I always loved this little bit. Halo 4's Jackals were the only Covenant redesign that I actually liked, and seeing them attacking Marines so primitively synergizes with their feral design really well. And on that note, I really like how threatening the Covenant are made out to feel in this level, mostly because the things they're killing are unarmed humans. The bit where you reach that woman freaking out because hunters have forced their way into her laboratory and are slaughtering everyone inside is really cool and plays into that emotion. The Didact's constant scans of the facility further this notion of desperation as well, and when he finally finds the composer, he literally tears it out of the facility to get it, and there's something about the way that this is conveyed that almost feels like getting beaten around the head, and I mean that in a literal sense. It feels really aggressive and violent, but not as violent as what he eventually does with the composer. The Didact unleashing the full force of the composer on Ivanov Station is one of the most brutal scenes in the entire franchise, and it's the only time that we ever see any gore unrelated to the Flood. Watching this ancient, horrifying device quite literally peel Tilson like an orange comes so out of left field, which makes the shock factor even more extreme and the aftermath even more bleak, because Cortana tried and failed to stop it from happening. Chief waking up in a cold, empty room surrounded by the ashes of the crew whilst Cortana exhibits clear melancholy is the perfect emotional aftermath to their failure.
Cortana. It's not over. Not yet.
Not yet.
And in the spirit of it not being over, Chief and Cortana hop in a broadsword and pursue the Didact one final time, armed with a Havoc tactical nuke to destroy the composer and hopefully kill him as well for good. Getting to actually fly the broadsword was another flying a pelican moment, and yeah, although it is just a very simple trench run, it does have some awesome moments, like for example, not knowing where the Didact is actually headed, only for the mantle's approach to leave split space and reveal Earth right above you, which gives you a real sense of kind of finality and drives home the stakes of what's at hand here. Then, having Lasky come in over the comms and tell Chief that FleetCom didn't take too kindly to Del Rio abandoning him on Requiem, and then also vowing to help you. This bit is awesome. I love this bit in particular.
Only one got left.
Copy, Cortana. Weapons. Repair firing solution. We promised to get the Chief inside that ship, and I'm not about to let that man down.
Lasky really is the ultimate bro. This entire section with 117 blasting in the background really does build up the adrenaline, which then dissipates quite quickly when you get inside the mantle's approach.
Plan B.
The tone shifts to almost horror in a weird kind of way, complemented by the very oppressive colours within the ship. Loads of aggressive reds, oranges, and dark rooms suspended above infinite chasms. Yeah, it's a bit cliche bad guy shit, but I think it works really well. Thematically though, Midnight really comes into its own when you reach the core of the ship. The Didact is guarded by a shield, and so to reach him, you have to deactivate 2 nodes, and this section feels like one of the most desperate pushes in the entire franchise, primarily thanks to the music. And it's capped off by the fact that, well, you fail. You watch Cortana tear herself apart to stop the Didact, and even still, he activates the composer and kills countless innocents in New Phoenix, And then, just to add insult to injury, he disintegrates Cortana's podium and effectively kills her. And then, everything that happens after this, to me, feels like an epilogue. Haunted by Cortana's echoes, you make it to the Didact and put him down, albeit in a quick-time event. Effectively killing a character of the Didact significance in a quick-time event feels almost like the perfect summarization of my main gripes with Halo 4's campaign, to be honest. Although, I will say, the one quick-time event that I actually like in this game is the nuke one. Chief gazing up at Earth, taking in what he thinks are his final moments before detonating a nuke by punching it, is so simultaneously hardcore and melancholic, which is fitting because of the cutscene that it of course feeds into. Now, Cortana's final goodbye, I think, is written really well, and I do like this cutscene a lot, but there are three kind of adjacent things that I want to touch on regarding this cutscene. Firstly, the people who misconstrue this scene and also Chief and Cortana's arc in Halo 4 in general as a love story, I think grossly misunderstand it. Yeah, the two definitely have affection for each other. I mean, despite not knowing each other all that long in like a raw sense, they literally saved the galaxy together countless times. So I think obviously there's gonna be some affection there. But I don't think at any point that affection is romantic or anything like that. To me, it just seems like an entirely platonic close friend scenario. Secondly, with the post hoc knowledge of what happens in Halo 5's story, I gotta be honest, this cutscene is completely ruined for me. Yeah, I can still enjoy it in isolation, but in the context of the broader story of Halo, all of this cutscene's meaning was totally annihilated by the brain-dead decision to not only revive Cortana in Halo 5, but to bring her back as the main antagonist and make her a big evil space dictator. Still, the absolute dumbest idea of all time, unequivocally. And thirdly, I really don't think that killing Cortana off in Halo 4 was a good idea, like, at all. It's your debut game in a franchise that you inherited, and you're killing off the character that its creators have repeatedly said was the true main character of the franchise, who the story was meant to revolve around. That was not a good idea, regardless of how well parts of her decline were written. And also, I feel like killing her off was such a short-sighted decision, same with the Didact as well. Like, where did they think the Reclaimer trilogy was going to go from here? Cortana was dead, and the Didact was wasted. Of course, yeah, they had the zombie Didact concept art, but I feel like they wrote themselves into a corner really badly with Halo 4's ending. That despite Chief's interaction with Lasky about being a machine, and despite the Didact's incredibly powerful monologue right at the end, just leaves a bitter taste in my mouth when all's said and done.
The reclamation has already begun, and we are hopeless to stop it.
So, does Halo 4 out-Bungie Bungie? No, absolutely not. This campaign has some excellent moments, and there is quite a bit here that I genuinely love. But on the same token, there are far too many moments that I either don't agree with, or that go firmly against pre-established lore that I adored. Killing off Cortana, utterly wasting the Didact, redesigning almost the entire franchise from top to bottom, and then also retconning one of the most important elements of the universe was just too much. Before this replay of Halo 4, I always loved Halo 4's story. Yeah, I never liked the campaign from a gameplay perspective, and clearly, for the most part, that's still the case, but I always used to like the story in isolation, but on this replay, I've really soured to the story as well, and I hate to say that because there are things like Keith Sharabaka's Didact, like Stephen Jen's Chief and Cortana performances, and like how faithfully the story initially picks up after Halo 3 that I love. The problem is, they just get drowned out by my dislikes. So, what are your thoughts on Halo 4 now? Have they changed since the game came out, or are they still the same? Do you still love it? Do you still hate it? Let me hear it down below in the comments. Reminder to use my links in the pinned comment or description to download War Thunder for free today on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile. Using my links grants both new players and those returning after more than 6 months away on PC and consoles multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator, along with the Eagle of Valor decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account. But this is only available for a limited time, so go download right now. With that said, let's round this accidentally Herculean video out there. I did not mean for this video to be this long, good God. I want to give a huge thank you to all of my amazing patrons for the continued support over there, as per usual. Thank you all so much, and thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you all in the next one.